Hello and welcome. Whether you are a regular listener or joining me for the first time, I'm grateful that you are here. My name is Peter Doherty. I'm a Catholic priest and a psychologist with a particular interest in the relationship between psychology and spirituality. Although these two fields have often viewed one another with suspicion, they are in fact deeply complementary. Sound psychological insight can strengthen spiritual life, while authentic spirituality, grounded in psychological well being, can deepen spirituality, meaning, resilience, and everyday life. This podcast reflects on the gospel reading for the coming week. It is intended as a resource for those preparing homilies or sermons, as well for anyone who teaches, studies, or simply wishes to engage more deeply with Scripture. Drawing on psychological research, biblical scholarship, and anthropological perspectives, I aimed to make the gospel more accessible and relevant to modern listeners. I also approach Scripture as a guide for faith and human development, recognizing that the biblical authors wrote within a worldview different from our own, offering rich and layered insights into identity, suffering, and hope. Today's reflection is based on Matthew chapter 10, verse 37 to 42. At first hearing, this gospel may appear somewhat jarring. However, its central theme is not unfamiliar. It echoes the foundation of our faith. Jesus teaches that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and the second is to love your neighbor as well, as found in Matthew chapter 22, verse 36 to 40. At the same time, Scripture also calls us to honor our father and mother, and we recall the powerful account of Abraham being asked to sacrifice his son Isaac in Genesis chapter 22. Across these passages, a consistent thread emerges. God is to be the most important relationship in our lives. As we have noted before, Jesus often uses strong and even extreme language to emphasize his message. It is noteworthy that in this passage, Jesus focuses on family relationships. Family life plays a critical role in both psychological and spiritual development. Within families, we form our identity, learn how to love, develop conflict resolution skills, and acquire our values and moral framework. Our earliest experiences of love and attachment shape how we relate to others throughout our life. Among therapists, the term dysfunctional family is often used, but I tend to resist it, as it implies that a perfectly functional family exists. In reality, all families experience some level of dysfunction, though to varying degrees. The term itself emerged from therapeutic work with individuals affected by alcoholism, where recurring behavioral patterns were observed. For example, adult children of alcoholics may struggle with trust and develop heightened vigilance. These responses are understandable, as they were adaptive in unpredictable environments when they were children. However, overdeveloped, they can create challenges later on in life and in relationships. During my time as a school psychologist, I was frequently asked to work with students experiencing behavioral difficulties. It was often disheartening to realize that the child identified as the problem was in fact expressing distress rooted in family circumstances. In many cases, meaningful progress required working not only with the child, but also with the family system, focusing on both healing and practical change. In light of this, we might consider whether Jesus is also reminding us that a strong and central relationship with God contributes to a healthier family life. In my own research, including a chapter contributed to the book Diversity and Addictions Counseling, I explored the relationship between spirituality, addiction, and mental health. The evidence suggests that a strong spiritual foundation can serve as a significant resource in supporting a healthy and stable life. This gospel also introduces the powerful metaphor of the cross as a description of discipleship. For the early Christian community, particularly those familiar with the reality of crucifixion, the call to take up one's cross would have been deeply unsettling. Jesus is conveying that difficult and even heartbreaking experiences may play a role in our path to salvation. While we are not called to seek out suffering, if and when it arises, it can be a source of growth and transformation. Jesus further teaches that those who lose their life will find it. This may refer to physical death and resurrection, but it can also be understood more broadly. It may point to the paradox that those who surrender their own plans and expectations in order to follow Christ often discover a deeper and fuller life. Finally, Jesus emphasizes the closeness of God in our relationships. He teaches us that how we treat others is in effect how we treat God. In this way, Christ identifies himself with those we encounter. At the same time, his words about losing one's life suggest that this transformation is not only relational, but is also deeply internal, touching the very core of our identity. Thank you for joining me today. If you find this podcast helpful, I invite you to listen each week. I also welcome your questions and reflections, and I encourage you to share this podcast with others who may benefit. If you have time, I suggest you listen to earlier episodes. You might find them very interesting. If you are listening on YouTube, you can support the podcast by subscribing and leaving a review. I would also be interested in knowing where you are listening from. I'd also like to do a special shout out to my listeners from New York who are listening. Thank you for joining me today. Next week, July the 5th, 2026, we will reflect on Matthew chapter 11, verse 25 to 30, where Jesus invites us to bring our burdens to him and find rest. We will explore the depth and meaning of that invitation next week. New episodes are released every Sunday, focusing on the upcoming gospel. Special thanks to Heather Patel-Doherty and Richard Coulomb for their continued support. May God bless you always.